have let me, Ruth Martin, have a small part in it by acting as either director or coordinator or whatever name you want to call me. And we have had these reminiscences in several places in the parish, and it's so good to be back home today in Grand Cane with this one. And I must say that we really appreciate all the people who have agreed to participate in this. And whereas it is sponsored by the Mental Health Association, and I want you to meet our president this year is Annie LeGrand. Annie, would you stand, please? President of the Mental Health Association of DeSoto Parish. And then we have a number of other organizations who also work with us or network with us to provide or to take care of the many things that need to be done. For example, the DeSoto Homemakers Council provides the refreshments for the group, and the Julia Sanders is here representing them. Beverly Bruce just had to leave, as you well know. And another group that's sponsoring us is the Family Counseling, of which is headed by Susan Anton over at the camera. And then we also have the Friends of the Library, and since Grand Cane did not have a local chapter of the Friends of the Library, the Friends of the Library in Mansfield are sponsoring this, and their president is here today, and that's Aunt Murphy. Aunt, would you stand? And another group that's sponsoring it is the Pilot Club. They provide the paper products for it. And who have I left out? Oh, yes, the DeSoto Preservation Society takes care of transcribing the videotapes after they are made. And I believe DeSoto Parish Library System. Oh my goodness, I left out one of the most important parts of us, and that's the DeSoto Parish Library System, and that is headed by, where are you, Wanda? That's headed by Wanda Berry. And Wanda, would you stand, please? I don't know, we could not have had these, any of these others without the help of Wanda Berry. And so why I left that one off, I don't know, Wanda. Excuse me. And all of these organizations have played their part and have made it easier for us to have it, to carry on these reminiscences, I guess you would call them, right? So today, we're just I'm real pleased to be able to present to you the moderator for today, and that person is Glory Wyndham, and you know her.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here today. When Ms. Martin asked me to come moderate this program, I was particularly pleased because from the time I was a small child, I enjoyed hearing older people remember when they were young and when towns began, and history has just been my thing that I'm interested in. So I was particularly pleased to be on this panel this morning. Grand Cane, of which I'm a native, is a special town to me and to those of us here. It was an important town in its early years and was a farming community. And I'd like for us to hear from Mr. Murphy Rogers, who grew up on a farm and can tell us something about what farming was like when he was a child. And if you other gentlemen will excuse me, I'm going to have to run this mic cable over here.
Yep.
There you go.
Do I have to stand up?
No, just relax.
The only good thing that I need to say in the beginning is that you've got to believe me. Nobody here can dispute the things that I'm going to say. I'm talking about 80 to 85 years ago, 1905 to 1910. You don't know how things have changed, how different the physical situation is how different the middle situation is. In those days, Grand Cane was a prosperous town. The people who lived around it were prosperous farmers. All of us were. I don't remember any particularly rich man. We all had the same amount of money. None. But we had plenty of things to eat. All we needed to wear, except shoes, we all went barefooted. I went barefooted the year I graduated from high school. Not particularly because I had to, but it was more comfortable that way. And I did it without any sense of being special, because the rest of the boys did, and a lot of the girls did. There were no roads in the Grand Cane. Just trails that you could come along in a wagon or on horseback. No ditches. No such thing as a road ditch then. No road machines, of course. No automobiles. No trucks. No telephones. No radios. No television. It makes you wonder what we did. I personally started fishing. I spent a lot of time fishing. I've kept it up until today. I have a motto on my front door that says that the good Lord doesn't detract from the time allotted man those hours spent in fishing. So that's the way I explain the fact that I've lived longer than most people. I'm going to talk principally about the road that is present 3015, goes out this way. Of course, there was a road down towards Mansfield, not the present road. The Mansfield-Shreveport Road in those days ran by Zion Hill Church, an old Hazelwood church that was a big meeting place in those days. Now it's in Bernard's pasture. Starting down about the Kansas City Southern Road coming this way on 3015 is what I'm going to talk about primarily, because that's where I lived. And it'll give you some idea of what the country was like then. The first people that lived there were black. Leonard White and his family, and they still live down there and still own land down there. Coming on up the road this way, I hope you remember where I'm thinking, can recall where I'm talking about. That's the old 3015 that goes out this way. The next family coming up was the Williams family. They had, I believe, 8 children. The next family was the Owens family. They had 5 children. And then a little further up was the Anthony family with 2 or 3 children. And then on the left-hand side of the road was the Hunt family with 5 or 6 children. And on the right-hand side of the road was the Rogers family. Now, there were 3 of us, 3 families of the Rogerses over there with 8 children. On up a little further, the old Force Jones place. That had been abandoned, and the Graham place had been abandoned. Then was the Sloan place, and it was in a beautiful beech grove. Most of you don't know what a beech tree is, but in my boyhood days, there were beech groves all over the country. Big spreading trees with smooth bark. The bark was so smooth and so tempting that anybody that went by scratched on it. Every beech tree had Mary loves John. JB does something else. Anyway, they were here all over the place. Now you don't know where there is a beech tree. There were chickapin trees everywhere. Rows of chickapin trees. I don't believe anybody can find a live chickapin tree in this country now. Great oak trees everywhere. Trees that would be worth $1,000 now were deadened with an axe, allowed to rot, piled and burned. There was no industry in this country. A few sawmills and a few cotton gins. So we all were farmers. I'm going to tell you what the farms were like. They were all small, all chopped out of the woods in cane breaks. There was a house, and around nearly every house was a small pasture where we kept the mules and horses and goats and sheep and pigs and chickens and turkeys and guineas and even pigeons. Those things were useful in those days. That's what we ate. If you wanted fresh meat for Sunday, you went out on Friday and killed a goat. It was delicious. And you'd pass a little of it out to your neighbors because you couldn't keep all of it yourself. There was no place to keep it. There was no refrigerator. Didn't even have ice in the beginning. After a while, we had ice and ice boxes. But yeah, everybody had a well in the backyard, and they let butter and milk down into that well to keep it cool. That was the nearest we had to a refrigerator. And we raised cotton for money. That was the only money crop at that time. All the open land around here then was in row crops. Everybody raised cotton for money. A bale of cotton was worth maybe $50. The ambition of every good farmer was to raise a bale to the acre. Nobody did it very often. Occasionally they did. Most of us raised a bale on 10 acres. And we worked hard to get it. You had to plow and hoe. We'd get out there and hoe. The 8-hour day hadn't been invented then. We worked from sunup to sundown. And I remember we'd get out there and hoe all day long. When the sun would go over behind the trees, somebody would stop and say, well, let's go home. Another day, another dollar. A million days, $1 million. Well, I was seriously considering becoming a millionaire. That was something to be in those days. There wasn't but one millionaire that I ever heard of, and that was John D. Rockefeller. And I was going to be a millionaire, just a million days. I didn't worry to figure out how long that would be. But we all had that, and all raised corn to feed the mules and the animals, and to grind for meal. That was a big item in the food in those days. Everybody had all kinds of melons, cantaloupe, watermelons, squash, pumpkins, cashaws, and we ate those things. Everybody had sugar cane for syrup. Most of us had beehives for honey, and of course all kinds of vegetables. And we spent our time raising those things. That was a lot of work. I guess I better stop pretty quick, but I want to say again that we were all prosperous farmers. And you can realize how important that was. We were happy people. Nobody was worried. You read this sad story about the man having 1,000 acres of crops out here and getting it all, losing it all, and giving up his life. That's terrible. The farmer in this day and time has problems that are beyond, in some cases, living. There was no such thing in those days. We were all just here and happy. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Murray. As the town progressed and grew, and as the population increased, more and more businesses were opened up. And even as a child, when I was a small child, I remember that every store downtown that is empty now had a business and had some commercial concern down there. But I want Mr. Bernard, who knows more about the growth of the business of the town, to tell us about this. Excuse me, Mr. Bernard. Here you go.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Well, I come here in 1928, and there's a thrivingest little old town in the Soda Parish other than Mansfield. And I believe there were 7 mercantile companies, 3 filling stations, 2 drugstores, 2 places to eat, 2 doctors, 1 dentist, 1 blacksmith, and I made the second one when I come here. And all the houses had a picket fence around it, and all of them had a cow pen. But the livestock could run out, the reason they had the picket fence. Well, I'd say there's 600 or 700 people living in Grand Cane, and 1,500 to 2,000 living around it. And all of them raising cotton and depending on cotton, like Mr. Rogers said. And they had 2 gins, 1 sawmill, and the schoolhouse. And they had the first old schoolhouse that they started off in up there that they've torn down in the last few years. And everything was, the cotton everywhere you looked, there was still cotton, like Mr. Rogers said. And the sawmill had to get back out to get their logs. And like he said, everybody was more or less happy, getting along good. The radio had just come into being. They were just finishing up the light system. When I come here, a lot of people hadn't got the house even wired in 28. And they had a 3-story building with an onion dome on it, and had 1 house in town that had a onion dome on it, which both of them belonged to the Paytons. And they had 3 churches. They even had the Presbyterian church in, which has been abandoned. And the town done real good and had a shoe shop until the paved road come along. That was a great thing for the town, give a little work for the people that's in the Depression. And I was a horseshoer back in them days, and I shod horses from Stonewall to Converse till I cut my finger off and couldn't pick up a nail. And the town started going down that day when they poured the last concrete. She went to dying. And Henry Smith and a lot of these boys played up and down front of my shop. When they was kids, they'd get in the way, but there was a lot of help. If I hadn't had them boys, I wouldn't have made it, because every time I needed a striker, I'd call one of them. So, and it's got down now, I don't believe we got a store in town. We don't have a gin, we don't have a sawmill. They've got 2 churches, but we got a good scoop.
Mr. Bernard, did you have a jail?
Yeah, we had a jail, which I presently own in my backyard. And every now and then they put somebody in there, and when they did put one in there, it caused a little confusion and all like that. But they'd get up to the bar and hoot and holler because they're probably drunk. So they had a whole ring in the bottom of the jail. So if he hollered too loud, they handcuffed him to that ring so he couldn't get up to the window.
You ever married?
Yeah, I was mayor 3 times, and which for no avail. I saved them some money to buy something with here in town, like sewer and water, and the rascals voted me out and spent it for something else. But we do have a water system, and but it don't belong to the town. It's a community water system. But the town finally got sewer and got all the trash out the street as far as sewerage, but they can't hardly keep the town mowed like they did when they had the cows mowing it.
Mr. Bernard, did they ship?
Huh?
Was the produce shipped by railroad?
Yeah. My wife's folks had a peach orchard up here, and they shipped peaches to New Orleans, and but that's a hearsay deal. And another hearsay deal that there used to be a bunch of quail hunters in the area. And they'd ship a barrel of quails to New Orleans every now and then. Now, how they could buy ice in. They'd got a little further along than when Mr. Rogers was talking about it. So the town was a very prosperous little town when I come here, but it's dwindled down to it's a bedroom town now. And
well, I'm going to ask Mr. Bernard something else later, but right now I want to talk about the bank. As the town began to get more prosperous, of course, we had a bank. And from the earliest times I've known, Mr. Allison Smith was the banker. Now, I'd like for you to tell us about how the bank started and when you began.
That's my time, too.
With that,
Well, when I was asked to make a few remarks, I said, well, I'll do it, but it's going to have to be a very few remarks because I don't have many remarks to make. And Dory said that after the town got prosperous, we got a bank, but I don't think that's true. The town wasn't very prosperous. As Murphy said, we all just alike. We had the same amount of money, which was none. So I don't know why they needed a bank in Grand Cane. But the bank was founded in 1904, and it was organized by 22 different stockholders, and most of them were Grand Cane people, but some of them were people that I cannot identify. But the biggest stockholders, strange to say, were from Pelican. The Joyner brothers in Pelican were the biggest stockholders to start off with. They had 30 shares. There wasn't 150 shares to start off with. It was capitalized at $15,000, which you couldn't buy anything for $15,000 now. But anyway, that was the capitalization. And the Joyner brothers in Pelican had 30 shares to start off with. And they were the largest stockholders. And I don't know why that was, except that my father, Mr. Smith, came from Pelican to Grand Cane, and he had formerly known the Joyners while he was down there. He may have boarded in their home, I don't know. And he may have kept books for them, I don't know what he did. But anyway, he came to Grand Cane and was working for Hicks and Richardson as a bookkeeper. And then when they organized the bank, he started out, the bank eventually got to be identified with Mr. Smith. And everybody said that Mr. Smith's bank. But Mr. Smith had just one share of stock to start off with. But he was the employee, and I think the bank had the distinction of being the only bank that ever had only one full-time employee for the whole time it existed. And the banking hours are very different now. We bank from about 8:30 in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon and take Saturdays off. We didn't have any holidays back in those days, and he banked from sun up to sundown. As soon as he got through with breakfast, he'd go out and open the bank, and it was available to the customers as soon as they wanted to come in. And then he worked till nearly dark, and as long as the bank was open, well, he'd accept the customers and wait on them. Many times he had to go back downtown, we call it downtown, to work in the evening, because he had to do all his own bookkeeping and janitor work and stuff like that, so he couldn't get through with it in one day, just one man. So he had to go down there at night sometimes to do his bookkeeping work. He was the only employee, but he had a bunch of children coming along, and when we got old enough, we would go down after school and help him with his bookkeeping. We'd run the adding machine and do the posting on the individual ledgers to keep the individual accounts. When the bank started,
he didn't have any machines like that. He kept all the accounts by hand. He'd write out the amounts on a sheet and keep that. And when he got ready to make a statement, he had to list each check and each deposit on a separate sheet and mail it out or let the customers come in and get it. My job, when I got big enough, I'd come down after school and run the posting machine. Now, one of the highlights, I think, maybe of the bank was the time it got robbed in the daylight. That was back, I don't remember the date. It must have been somewhere in the early 20s.
It was.
And somehow or another, the law people got tipped off that the bank was going to be robbed. And two lawmen from Shreveport came down here, and Mr. Clyde Williams was the sheriff in Mansfield. And they came to the bank of Grand Cane and were lying in wait for the robbers. And they were in the back room, and the robbers came in the front door. I don't know whether there were 2 or 3 of them. But they went into the back room and broke the glass in the back room so they could reach in and unlatch it. And when they did, they saw those officers sitting in there. And of course, they started to run then. And Mr. Clyde Williams shouted at them to stop. They didn't stop. And so he fired his shotgun over their heads and knocked out the plate glass in the front window. But the robbers kept running across the highway, and Mr. Clyde Williams shot one of them in the back, and he fell over between the highway and what was then the depot and the railroad track, and it killed him. And the other 1 or 2, whichever it was, I don't know, they surrendered, so they didn't get shot. And of course, when I got to be the banker in 1947, I took over. 1949, after my father died, I was robbed twice in the daylight. One